citizens singing at once. It was so loud. You couldn't even hear the lady over the PA system in that moment. It was just Canada.
Was just the fans chanting it. Couldn't hear her voice at all. It was loud.
I was losing my voice, just feeding off of the energy if that was, just pulsing through that building. It was such a beautiful experience.
It was loud. Everyone kind of put politics aside. It was a Canadian atmosphere for sure. It was just chills.
Living in that moment, it was just one nation, one body. Everyone was together.
When Mariner scored, the building shook, literally. That was probably the best hockey game I've ever been to.
And it was the most Canadian pride I've ever felt.
Oh, if you think that was good. Saturday, it's Canada versus the United States. Saturday also happens to be the 60th anniversary of the Canadian flag. So you know what you need to do.
Welcome to Gaslit Nation. Our opening clip was a CBC News clip from about 2 months ago showing the patriotic passion and anti-American energy that has swept Canada, sadly, due to Donald Trump and JD Vance, continuing to threaten to make Canada the first state, which obviously will never happen because, as we saw in these historic election results, Canadians will not allow it to happen. And patriotic Americans across the political spectrum will not allow it to happen. We will be stopping those Rambo tanks in the street before Canada ever gets invaded by Trump and Vance. Should they want to launch some stupid war to cling to power, it's not going to happen. We're not going to let it happen. So all of this is to say, congratulations to Canadians for doing what you needed to do. Here is CNN interviewing a Canadian voter who sums up these historic election results. Let's play that clip.
I think who I voted for would be the best to take care of Trump, because Trump is, I'm sorry to say, an ass, and he shouldn't even be president of the United States. But because he is, we need a strong person so that we could stand strong.
Now, this is a massive sea change. Justin Trudeau, just within the last year, he was enemy number one in Canada. There was this massive anti-incumbent energy, the kind that created horrific headwinds for candidates around the world in 2024. Kamala Harris did remarkably well against these headwinds, but most races around the world, big races, did not. And Trudeau, his party, was on life support. There was massive anger due to inflation, massive anger due to moral decay over Canada standing by America's side, while America under Biden and Kamala Harris let Netanyahu carry out war crimes, even though Biden went to Israel and gave a speech saying no war crimes, follow international law, and then look the other way. So a change energy, a revolutionary energy, especially in a politically diverse, multicultural country like Canada, is to be expected in such a tough political year. But then Trump comes along in America and starts destroying everything deliberately, terrorizing, deliberately creating a human rights crisis, a constitutional crisis that's been ongoing since he came to power with Russia's illegal help in 2016, and then just casually, not so casually, saying, yeah, Canada's going to be the 51st state. You're welcome, Canada, over and over again. And JD Vance and others are backing him up. And the Canadians have put their foot down. There have been so many reports of Canadians canceling trips to the United States, selling vacation homes to the United States, boycotting American products, singing their hearts out at national anthems, especially when it's the US on the other team, and on it goes. And the maple leaf-shaped cherry on top of all of this, the sundae of gooey ice cream goodness glory that was the Canadian election results, are Pierre Poilievre, who has been in power holding his seat since 2004. So over 20 years he's been in power in this seat. He is the conservative leader in Canada. He lost. He lost his election. He was the MAGA fanboy, the MAGA tool, and he lost. If you can hear me wherever you're listening to this, I'm smiling. My voice is smiling. And who did he lose to? Bruce Fanjoy, a contractor, a builder, who is known in Canada for building his family a sustainable, smart, energy efficient home known as a passive home that creates all the energy it needs to keep the home running. And he's also known for taking some time off from work to watch the kids so that his wife, now a doctor, can finish up her medical studies. So Bruce Fanjoy, we're all a fan, joyfully a fan of Bruce Fanjoy. He represents the kind of men that you learn about when you study early human civilization. Men who were tough, men who were collaborative, men who were cooperative, men who were innovative, and men who, in many cases, fought alongside women, hunted alongside women. He represents the evolution of the species, where Pierre Poilievre and the MAGA Nazis like Elon Musk, Vance, and Trump that he was cheerleading represents de-evolution. The cavemen that want to club us over the head and drag us back into time, back into the cave, and into the extinction of our species, just like the Neanderthals. So that's really what this election was about. Evolution versus de-evolution. And Canada chose to be on the side of evolving and the side of international law and the Global Democratic Alliance. And I want to congratulate all the Gaslit Nation listeners. I know many that fought their hearts out, made a lot of sacrifices to show up for their communities, to vote strategically, because there's a multi-party system in Canada, and also to do everything they could to fact check the disinformation war. The far right, Elon Musk, they all needed Canada to go their way to really prove that they have a working model for the world when they don't. Obviously, all they have to offer is destruction. But Canadians, through grassroots power, through patriotism, you fought back. Thank you so much for doing so. You benefited, obviously, not only yourselves, but us here in America, because you're helping protect the international order, the international system of rules, laws, because we have a lawless convicted felon in the White House right now, terrorizing everyone. So you're building a dam against that. And so thank you. Mark Carney, who's going to continue as Prime Minister, he is very much the right person for this moment. He helped weather the storm in 2008 in the global economic crash caused by, again, Republicans, then under the George W. Bush, deregulating Wall Street. That was an American-created economic terror that hit the world. And Mark Carney helped Canadians weather that storm and be resilient during that. And Canada did well because of that, thanks to Mark Carney. And then again, Mark Carney happened to be head of the Bank of England, the first non-Brit to hold that position. Mark Carney helped the UK get through the chaos, the self-inflicted chaos of Brexit. Again, American Republicans helped engineer that chaos when Steve Bannon and the Mercers come in with their psychological warfare weapon, Cambridge Analytica. I'll link to a chilling documentary on it. They used Cambridge Analytica in the Brexit vote, working alongside the Russians to tip the scales in that extremely close Brexit vote. The Russians had hundreds and hundreds of bots. The Russians were using their disinformation machine, a big shitstorm of kleptocracy, tipping the scales in that close Brexit vote. And Mark Carney was the man who stayed calm, cool, collected, and helped the UK get through that as the head of the Bank of England. And now his third big mission is to help Canada get through Trump and Vance. And we don't even know if Trump is going to step aside in 2028. He and Republicans, MAGA merchandise, are already promoting Trump 2028. They're already threatening to try to make our elections even more voter suppressed than they already are. It's a very scary time for our country and the world. And thank goodness we have Mark Carney to the north. And thank goodness we have Claudia Sheinbaum to the south in Mexico, who's also wildly popular and also standing strong. So North America is in a sandwich of democracy right now with a bunch of putrid baloney, rotten to the core and green and moldy in the middle. But we're going to cleanse. We're going to get through this. America, all eyes on you. We'll talk more about the big elections we have coming up that the world should be watching because they impact not just us here at home, but you too, wherever you are. So thank you, Canada. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. What are your thoughts on that, Terrell?
The Canadians gathered around they have one national sense of their own collective security, whereas in our election, we were conditioned to really become more isolated and to find our own individual security. You mentioned a couple things that stand out. Poilievre, not only did he lose the race for prime minister, he lost his seat in the parliament. And what's really significant, he held that seat in a very rural part of Ottawa. And so he was actually defeated by a member of the Liberal Party. And what that tells me is that even people in a rural part of Canada appreciate the fact that a well-moneyed individual is not working in their best interest, which is something that I wish people here in the United States could understand. But Canada is particularly different for the fact that they have nationalized healthcare. And even as the tariffs are being pushed into full swing, there was this national unity of these Americans are not going to fearmonger us. In the United States, everything is based on these quote unquote illegals are going to come and they're going to threaten our safety. It's going to be the Haitians who are eating dogs and cats. And we have this very hyper sense of empowerment when we feel that a person who's worth billions of dollars can come in and they can make our lives better, even though we're dirt poor and we'll never be a part of their club. Canadians have the sense to distinguish the difference between the two. In America, it's our goal to convince the rest of the working poor who voted for Trump that we need to take the lead of Canada.
I'm just feeling so much relief. And this follows the euphoric excitement over the big slapping that Elon Musk got out of Wisconsin when he tried to buy that election with giant Bob Barker checks.
The Supreme Court seat. That's the Supreme Court seat.
Yeah, that was a Supreme Court seat. And so Wisconsin and now Canada. And then we had the German election where, again, Elon Musk tried to boost the Nazi historically aligned
Alternative for Deutschland.
Yes, and that didn't work. Germans slapped back there, and now they have an even stronger prime minister, probably one of the strongest prime ministers Germany has had in decades, even stronger than Merkel in terms of his moral leadership of Europe. And so he's saying, like, give Ukraine what it needs to win the war. Merkel wouldn't even do that. So we are in new territory with fascism coming in and scaring people out of their complacency, showing the rest of the world you do not have the luxury for a protest vote. Protest votes don't even work. Protest votes are not a thing. When you stay home and don't vote, that is voting. You are giving the other side a lift. So I want to remind all Americans, we need to not take for granted all that we have left. I know it looks dire out there. I know, AI is coming for us. The Peter Thiels of the world want to eradicate us and establish these fiefdoms and turn us all back into barefoot and tattered peasants. I understand it looks very scary. But we still have the luxury of a lot of democracy left that parts of the world, like Georgia, the country of Georgia, would dream of, right? Like we still have the luxury of democracy. It's not slipping away from us yet because we're putting up a fight and we're showing that when we fight, we can absolutely win. And that brings us to an extremely important election. People have to pay attention to us here. I know people like to shit on New York for whatever dumb reason, because they see us as I know Donald Trump came from here. We're sorry. We didn't like him either. We tried to warn you. Our investigative journalists like Wayne Barrett tried to warn you. And so New York City has always represented the worst and the best of America. Wall Street sprouted up with the massive moneymaker, the blood moneymaker of slavery. Because you had all these slave ships that needed to be insured and so on. All these banks that sprouted up on Wall Street. But then you also had the abolition movement that was growing strong here. John Brown was giving speeches and collecting money here so he could start his raid, which would kick off the Civil War eventually, shift the energy in the country. If you go to Greenwood Cemetery here in Brooklyn, it is monument after monument to Americans that risked everything to try to fight for a better America, to force our nation to finally live up to its founding principles. And so we have a New York City mayor's race this June 24. Early voting starts June 14. You can get your absentee ballot. The Democratic primary, that's what I'm talking about. It's the primary because the actual race itself is November 4th, along with Virginia's governor race and New Jersey's governor race, other bellwethers people are going to watch as we head into the midterms of next fall. But the primary, the Democratic primary, takes place this June. And the Democratic primary is significant because whoever wins it basically becomes the next mayor of New York. But now things are different because our deeply corrupt mayor, Eric Adams, who was the target of a sweeping DOJ investigation into all sorts of corruption, including taking money from foreign nationals to look the other way when it came to allowing unsafe building construction conditions. This was a hazardous condition that Eric Adams' administration was allowing that could come back to take lives. But he looked the other way for money. This is what they do in Russia. So Eric Adams and his whole administration would fit right in Russia, but they wouldn't take him because they're black. So Eric Adams, deeply corrupt, target of a DOJ investigation. All of local radio here in New York City was just this. And then suddenly Trump comes along, the big deal maker, the big pro quo, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Eric Adams made a deal with Trump. He let Trump's stormtroopers, known as ICE, come in, legally set up shop in Rikers Island, a prison known for human rights abuses that mayors have promised to shut down, but no one actually went through with that because no one wanted to take on the powerful industrial complex as well as the NYPD. And so Adams allowed Trump to illegally set up shop in Rikers so they can strengthen and build their international gulag that stretches from Rikers all the way to El Salvador. And so Adams is basically just a tool in the gulag for Trump's gulag fetish dreams. And we need him gone. But of course, Eric Adams being Eric Adams and being all ego, talking in the third person, going to Rouse, an exclusive restaurant with his Republican mobster friends, he's so shameless that he refuses to leave and he's running as an independent. So it's scary times. That could split a vote. We don't know. Andrew Cuomo, a confirmed predator, is also on the ballot for the Democratic primary. And he is somebody that's openly at war with progressives. And so it's not a done deal that we're going to get some solid Democrat to win the Democratic primary and then make it through the final round and become New York City's next mayor. Remember, we need a strong mayor here in New York to stand up to Trump, to stand up against global kleptocracy, because so much of the oligarch filth of this world, they funnel their money here. They buy up our real estate, driving up rent and housing prices. New York Magazine did a whole expose on this where they showed how Chinese oligarchs were buying up penthouses for their unborn babies. Russian oligarchs are hiding their money here.
If there's any city in America that's consequential to the world and how things operate, it is New York. And what's really troubling and should make people uneasy about Eric Adams is that in America's biggest city, the Turkish government, according to the indictment by the Department of Justice that was later thrown out, the former indictment, is that he would receive luxury international travel upgrades from wealthy businessmen from the Turkish government. And essentially what they were, and this is starting back when he was the Brooklyn borough president. And so basically, they were just trying to warm him up, slowly but surely upgrading his travel, putting him up in expensive hotels. He was accused of knowingly accepting illegal campaign contributions from Turkish businessmen who hid their contributions of up to $2,000 each by saying that there are residents or people who are legally able to donate to his campaigns. And we have matching funds in New York City. According to the DOJ, Adams received up to $10 million matching funds for a New York City race. That is a lot of money. So this man essentially used the system to illegally get millions of dollars in public funds by illegally accepting money from the Turkish government who wanted influence. And they also got him or accused him of pressuring the fire department of New York City to approve a building for the Turkish government acquisition that wasn't up to code. And this indictment has all of the receipts. It has text messages, multiple witnesses, etc. Former Senator Menendez from New Jersey, where the Egyptians were giving him gold bars and money and all these other things. Essentially, Adams, he was a cheap trick, essentially. So all you had to do was to fly this dude out, treat him nice, give him fancy dinners, and you got him. That actually makes it worse. The corruption is worse enough. But the fact that you are a cheap hoe really says that we can do anything for you. That should scare the shit out of us. It should be terrifying. And then you got a man who likes to grab him by the pussy, Cuomo, right? Where the Attorney General, Tish James, conducted an investigation. After that investigation was covered, there are multiple women who said that he did, wide range things that were inappropriate. And here's the wild thing about this. Look, I don't care whatever sexual interest or freakiness that you have, but goddamn, you can't control your dick at work. So we got a guy that grabs him by the pussy, and then, that's running for mayor. Then we got a guy who is being flued out from the Turkish government because he's a cheap hoe. Those are your top candidates right now that stand a fighting chance. This is fucked up. And so what we really need to do in New York City is we need to get people to believe that their lives can exponentially improve by getting away from this machine politic. The machine politic has money. Well, Eric Adams had money because he essentially, according to the document, stole it. Okay, essentially stole it illegally. So that's how he had the money. And then you have this legacy political family like the Cuomos who came in, but essentially as New Yorkers, we have to believe that there is another way of thinking, that there is a new way that we can exist without all this corruption that doesn't benefit us. And so there are so many good candidates on the ballot right now. So many of them that you can choose from. There are so many people who have a more progressive, forward-thinking outlook for this city. One of the main things that we have going on in New York City is that housing prices are under control. I live in a hole in the box. I paid $1,000 for rent, which is way too much for what I pay. It's a little amount, but for this little spot, it's ridiculously small amount of money. I mean, it's an incredible amount of money for the size of for the size of it. There's a guy who I'm voting for, named is Zoran Memdani, Assemblyman from Queens. And so what he wants to do is he wants to freeze rent. He wants to make, and he wants to provide affordable healthcare. I believe he either wants it free or incredibly affordable. And then he also wants to make public transportation free. All right. And the main thing, too, is that he has an eye on the world and saying that what Israel is doing is wrong. He's a strong critic of Israel. And rightfully so. We need somebody in city government who will be able to defend these students at Columbia and elsewhere in this city who are being bullied by a government that's telling the city what the to do. And so when we talk about the importance of this election, do we really feel safe here in New York City with all the things that we have talked about and all the things that he's rightfully accused of? And that case was dropped against him by the Department of Justice because Trump wants him in his pocket. And so what we have right now is a man who's not only corrupted by Israel, not only corrupted by Turkey, but he's corrupted by the president of the United States, who in the state of New York is convicted of fraud. We have this politically incestuous pool of corruption. Roughly a quarter of the people who are eligible to vote come out. We need more than that. If we can get that up to 50%, Cuomo can lose. The only reason why Cuomo, who wanted to be president, and who believes that he can win the mayor's race, is because that's the seat that's available to him. That's the only reason why he's running. He has nothing else to run for. And so if these people win, the corruption will continue. Cuomo will be a Democrat in name, someone who will be feel emboldened that he can sexually harass people. And if Adams wins, he pimps out the race card 24/7. The reason why Governor Hochul of New York isn't removing him, which she has the power to do, by the way, is because in part she fears that Adams' contingency of Black supporters is going to come out and play the race card. You think that this is what Black excellence is about? No, this man is being pimped out by the Turkish government. The indictment has it all. I'm going to stop here, but anyway, I'm voting for Zoran Memdani. I believe that we need a radical shift in this city's politics. The rent is too high. We have a homeless epidemic that's getting out of control. Developers have too much power and influence in City Hall. And we need to be, and people who are having children in the city need to be able to have affordable options where people can go to work and know that their kids be taken care of, and they don't have to give away half of their freaking check to do it. We need food prices that can be controlled. We need students who come to this multicultural city to study. If they are Muslims or if they have any moral clarity about Palestine, they can go to school and then they can leave class and not worry about ICE coming to pick them up and detain them and sending them to New Mexico for the simple reason of being Arab and speaking out against a genocide. This election is so critical to how the rest of this country is going to move. And if we don't take a moral stand and step out of our fear of what we know and make a bold choice, it's going to be a very bold indicator of what New Yorkers who are participating in the election really think about ourselves if we allow somebody like Cuomo to win or Adams to, to keep his seat.
I feel like this is a very precarious crossroads for our city and also the country and the world, because it's New York City. It's practically its own country. And it needs to be a safe haven against these kleptocracy, anti-democracy forces. When you talk about Eric Adams' rap sheet, Netanyahu, he and his wife both investigated for corruption, both indicted. We did a whole episode recently on it called The BB Files, which I'll link to in the show notes, with Alex Gibney and Alexis Bloom on their damning documentary told by leaked audio sent to them, which features Israeli prosecutors, the best of Israel, investigating the worst of Israel. And Netanyahu has purged that government, surrounded himself with convicted terrorists, the worst of Israel, just like the Stephen Millers in the White House today in America. And he's turned Israel into this lawless kleptocracy aligned with Russia, which backs Hamas. As the must-watch documentary, The BB File, shows, Netanyahu was making sure that Hamas was getting the funding they needed in the lead up to October 7th. And then you have Erdogan in Turkey, who you also mentioned, who just had one of his top rivals, the mayor of Istanbul, arrested, leading to weeks of protests in the street, including by an activist dressed up as Pikachu, got handcuffed. All right. So we've got Netanyahu, lawless Netanyahu in Israel, lawless Erdogan in Turkey, and then lawless Trump in the United States, convicted criminal in the White House, filling his administration with the least qualified, disinformation-rotted, Russian-rotted, fascist bootlickers, and endangering not just us, they're rolling back regulations with illegally mass purging the government, stripping people of their livelihood, stripping people of life-saving aid, leading to deaths. There's been reports already of people dying because of what they did to USAID alone. And then giving a green light to Russia, that Russia can do what it wants in Ukraine. I don't care that Trump and Zelensky had some Hallmark card of a photo taken outside of the Pope's funeral in the Vatican. That doesn't change anything. Putin knows what he's dealing with, what an easy mark Trump and the sycophants around him are, that he can have his way with them. So Eric Adams is basically a tool for these anti-democracy, kleptocratic forces. And then Cuomo, a predator. I do not want to raise my two little girls in a city with a predator as mayor, in a country with a predator in the White House. I cannot do that. Psychologically, I cannot do that. One of the major concerns I have, I don't think the left has it together. We don't have that cohesiveness to strategically vote. Like the French had to strategically vote to stop Le Pen. Canada's a multi-party system. They had to vote strategically to get this historic outcome that's going to boost their country, not just for their own quality of life, but their global standing. And I don't see the left in New York City rallying around saying, here's the way we vote strategically. I still think there needs to be some sort of strategy where the left has to unite in a diverse coalition and say, this is how you cast your vote. You rank this person 1, you rank this person 2. By doing that, and then when we all come back together again as friends in the November election to stop Eric Adams.
Yeah, but you know why that's not happening? I feel like there's a spectrum of progressive that we don't talk about enough. Zoran Memdani, for example, who is a socialist. Like, I am going to support him because, number one, I don't have a problem with socialism in the ways that, in a very simple.
Well, I just want to be clear. He's a socialist in the sense of Fox News' worst nightmares when it comes to how they see the left. But he's just your run-of-the-mill EU elected leader, right? He's
a thing, though.
Bernie Sanders would be a moderate when it comes to the EU. And so when we talk about socialist, we're not talking about a Marxist in a Che Guevara t-shirt who wants to collectivize everything. We're talking about your average EU elected leader. Go on.
Yes, which we have to talk about for the very simple reason that that's different for you. That's different for U.S. politics, and I think the exact reason why I'm saying that is that there are people for whom he is like who are on the far left. Even he is considered not progressive enough, right? And so that gets to my point in that there is so much perfection that we seek out of a candidate. There are too many people here who have a purity contest. And we were talking about this the other night. Like, a lot of left-wing progressive people, they're not fun people to be around.
So we were saying the other night that Blue Sky feels cliquish, like it's a Washington, D.C. bar, and everyone's too serious. You don't really want to spend time there.
With Zoran Memdani, he is somebody who I think if we give him 2 terms, our lives will be infinitely better. And we need to create a support system around him because the ideal situation is that, and we need to get people to say that even though people use the term socialist, we need to take that term and claim it and say it's not bad and here's why, right? And so we don't need to run away from these terms because it's not a bad thing. Let's just be perfectly clear.
You mean socialist? You mean quality of life advocate?
Right. Like those are positive things. This current structure, are you happy with it right now? And so we all need to stop running away from language that's good. Socialism is not bad, okay? When I was in Austria, for example, I had some issue with my head that required a dermatologist to look at it. And so, long story short, I booked a appointment at a private facility. I booked it at 11:30, got my appointment at 1:30, went to the 1:30 appointment, signed some paperwork, and I'm thinking that I'm going to have to come out $1,000 for this procedure, or they may not even take me that day. I signed the paperwork. I go into the doctor's room. She looks at it. She said, okay, we need to lance this. Hey, let's get ready. I was really shocked. I said, you're going to do this now? She said, yeah, we're going to do it now. I made my evaluation and she did a little lancing of on my head. And I said, okay, well, go get some medicine. I went outside to the reception and she said, okay, $300. I said, excuse me. I thought I missed the $1,300. No, she said $300. And she said, Terrell, this is so expensive. You don't have a government card because this is way too expensive. I don't know. I don't understand why you're paying this amount of money. I said, oh, it's cheaper. She said, yeah. Do you have your government card? I said, no. She said, this is so expensive. You stay here a long time. You should get your government card because this would be much less, maybe like under 100 or something like that. I don't know. But my point is that anywhere that I've gone throughout Europe, this is the norm. Okay. This can be the norm in New York City. This could be the norm across the country because it should be, because we should not have to go bankrupt in order to live as human beings. Okay. Capitalism has our minds all screwed up, and we need to take the time to educate people on all these things that we've been taught to be the boogeyman, but we can in fact save our lives. And that's the one thing that progressives writ large have to come together to realize. Because I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that I have an issue with progressives on is, at least online, especially where it's kind of where
we are progressives, to be clear, but some of our own are sabotaging our larger collective movement to get the progress we all talk about.
Yeah, but you know what though, Andrea? Like, the thing with us is that because we support Ukraine and because we support that, because we believe that they have the right to have arms to defend themselves, we're supporting the mass military industrial complex. Okay. And so all this stupid shit, people don't have the intellectual and emotional dexterity to realize that, yes, we believe that what's going on in Gaza is a genocide. Yes, America needs to reverse its very imperial colonial outlook and actions in the Middle East and South America and Africa. We all agree on that. We believe in reparations. We believe that Africa needs a Marshall Plan. All of that. You can get us on board with that. But what you can't do is say that Ukraine doesn't have the ability, shouldn't have the right to use U.S. arms to defend themselves. And we don't have to operate on this stupid, illogical notion that just because you put arms in Ukraine's hands, that you're making Russia mad and you're using NATO in order to threaten a country that's also as equally as colonial as the American country that you're calling out. And so we have all these stupid, idiotic, morally inconsistent arguments over things that don't help any of us in the long run.
I want to support Zoran Mamdani, but my litmus test for true progressives, if you are serious about taking on the oligarchy, then you have to be serious about supporting sovereignty for Ukraine. Ukraine has one of the most robust, resilient civil societies in the world. This is a group of anti-corruption activists, independent journalists who have suffered so much over the last decade plus, not just in their coverage of this war and still fighting their own government and forcing their own government to be better in this war, but in the many years prior. So I'd say like the last 20 years alone, they've gone through so much. Like one of their 4 colleagues was killed in a car bomb in the heart of Kiev. One of their mentors was beheaded, likely by a former Ukrainian president. And then they had Euromaidan, where they had government snipers coming after them, and on it goes. And still Ukraine fought corruption at home and abroad by doing this. And they educated newsrooms around the world. They helped newsrooms around the world expose their corruption at home because it's all linked. It's all linked. And Robert Mueller, in his 2011 Iron Triangle speech, told us it's all linked. The mafia of today is not sitting in some Italian joint in Canarsie plotting how to carry off its next heist. It is the oligarchs funding puppet candidates all over the world. And they all work together, and they launder their reputations through fancy PR firms and law firms in capitals across Western countries. And so when I see a progressive hero like Zoran Mamdani, because he's very much the favorite, he's coming from the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, which is pretty staunchly anti-Ukraine. And
I think they're also annoying.
Exactly. And so, I looked him up and I couldn't find a single thing he said about Ukraine. And that makes me think, okay, I know he went on a hunger strike for 15 days to help support and bring much needed debt relief to taxi drivers across New York. So, he obviously is somebody that's willing to put his body on the line for progress. And I admire that. And I'm seriously considering voting for him in ranked choice voting. But it's just such a red flag for me when these progressives are like, we're going to fight the oligarchy. How can you do that? By disparaging Ukraine, by not even bothering to bring up Ukraine as central in that fight for all of us. So Brad Lander, let's get to my first choice in ranked voting, New York City Comptroller Brad Lander, whom I love. And I worry about him because he's not flashy by any means. He just puts his head down and does the work. He's a good old Missouri boy. He's got a big war chest. He's got an endorsement from Working Families parties. Actually, a lot of his endorsements overlap with endorsements from Mamdani, so that's a good sign. And Brad Lander, I love, because a lot of hardcore grassroots activists and protest organizers that I know through Gaslit Nation, they're Gaslit Nation listeners, they've always shared stories what it's like to work with Brad Lander's office over the years. He's always shown up for them. And I feel like he's someone that we could get a meeting with if we needed something in regards to Ukraine. He would take it seriously. We wouldn't have to sit there and pull out a PowerPoint presentation to fact check Russian disinformation. It'd just be a very easy conversation. And Brad Lander led New York City in divesting funds from New York's pension, the 4th largest in the country. They divested from Russia in response to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Brad Lander led the fight to divest New York City pensions from Russia. He took that initiative and he led that fight and won it. And so he understands. And he's also staunchly anti-Netanyahu's lawless regime in Israel that countless Israelis are protesting and have been for so long now, even before October 7th. So Brad Lander, I feel, is the right mix of all things. And he's also fighting for affordable housing, affordable healthcare, and humane treatment for the mental health crisis in New York City. We've had this inflation crisis. We've had a flood of money leaving the city because you have these billionaires that made their money here. They go to low tax states like Florida so they can escape paying taxes, and they're pulling their money out of New York. And so New York has been struggling, and this has all been accelerating since New York City became ground zero in America for the once in a century pandemic of COVID. The mental health crisis, inflation crisis, economic crisis, and the money flight crisis. And so Brad Lander, as New York's controller, has been trying to plug those gaps for the most vulnerable in New York City. In this cutthroat, cannibalistic, hyper-capitalist society where we're all expected to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and smile through our own starvation as these oligarchs are enriching themselves and have all these dreams of enslaving us for their own ego gratification. And you have so many people who are just one missed paycheck away from homelessness, from food insecurity. You don't have a middle class anymore. And it's a horrible anxiety that even people doing well, relatively speaking, live with, because they think, by the grace of God, that could be me. And so I feel very safe with Brad Lander. I feel that he is, sure, like a socialist in terms of the EU elected public servant variety. Like he would fit right in. His politics, his way of leadership would fit right in as a European Union leader. But I feel that he has a stronger sense, a more sort of diplomatic, inclusive, not really tribal or cliquey high school cafeteria clique approach to dealing with issues holistically.
I agree.
And I feel a lot more included and heard. And where I feel like Zoran is somebody who's very much a social media darling, and that can feel very cliquish and shallow and off-putting. And I want New York City to become a resilient, social, democratic safety net like what Europeans enjoy. I want people to live here, go to school here, work, and if they should hit tough times through a medical emergency or a loss of a job, they have support. They have a place to land safely. They can get back up on their feet. The community, the taxpayers, everybody has their back. I want that more than anything because I myself live with that. I don't want to have to work until I die. I want my kids to be taken care of not just by me, their parents, but the state. I want my kids to have a safe, strong social security net.
I agree.
You cannot build that if you don't understand the reality of what we're up against, which is kleptocracy. And Russia, not just Israel, is an extraordinarily destructive, powerful node in that global virus of kleptocracy. So Zoran Mamdani, if you are listening, come on Gaslit Nation. Tell us how you feel about Ukraine, what your stance is on Ukrainian sovereignty and this war, because you're running for mayor of New York City. That is practically a country in terms of population size, certainly, and in terms of wealth, GDP. So you need to have a stance on this because Ukraine is the front lines of this global war of kleptocracy.
Want to join the conversation? Shape the show by becoming a member of Gaslit Nation on Patreon. Join our community of listeners for exclusive Q&A sessions, bonus shows, get all episodes ad-free, invites to live events, and more. Most importantly, connect with other listeners in our group chat and committees, planting seeds of change. Sign up at patreon.com/gaslit. Gaslit Nation hosts Resilience Political Salons every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Can't make it live? Recordings are available to our community on Patreon. Salons are your space to vent, ask questions, and connect with other listeners who also really, really hate Nazis. To help Ukraine with urgently needed humanitarian aid, join me in donating to Razom for Ukraine at razomforukraine.org. To help refugees in conflict zones, donate to Doctors Without Borders at doctorswithoutborders.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org. Gaslit Nation is produced by Andrea Chalupa. Our editing wizard is Nicholas Torres, and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going. Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle. Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smythe of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish. Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher. Todd, Dan, Milo, and Cubby, Abby Zavos, TBL92666, because we are defeating the Antichrist. Lily Wachowski, Ice Bear is Defiant, Sherry Escobar, Sydney Davies, Work for Better, Prep for Trouble, John Schoenthaler, Ellen McGirt, Larry Gasson, Ann Bertino, David East, Mark, Sean Berg, Kristen Custer, Kevin Gannon, Sandra Collins, Katie Masuris, James D. Leonard, Leo Chalupa, Carol Golstad, Marcus J. Trent, Joe Darcy, D.L. Singfield, Nicole Spear, Abby Rode, Jans Alstrup Rasmussen, Sarah Gray, Diana Gallagher, Leah Campbell, Jared Lombardo, and Tanya Chalupa. Thank you all so much for your support of the show. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.